Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Now we continue our reading of the life and teachings of Shri Madhwacharya, written by C.M. Padmanabhachar of Coimbatore. The publication of this book was first done during the early 1900s, so it is all more than 100 years old. It is now we continue the chapter, as I said, on Upanayana and early studies. The miraculous feats of the young boy Vasudeva were narrated, and now we move on to discuss about these kind of miraculous feats that divine beings who appear on earth exhibit. It is a divine maya that avatara purushas perform miracles before the very eyes of people, but these leave no enduring impression. Sri Krishna disclosed himself to Devaki and Vasudeva as soon as he was born. At that moment, they adored him as God incarnate. They were bidden to take him through barred doors and the flooding Jamuna. A series of miracles occurred before their eyes, but lo, the impression vanished soon after Yashoda was convinced that the babe Krishna was none other than the Almighty holding the universe in his stomach. When Sri Krishna shut up his mouth, Yashoda got into the old groove of ignorance and forgot all about the wonderful scene that she had witnessed. Time after time, Sri Krishna furnished proofs of his godhead, but the conviction brought about was ephemeral, except in the minds of seers and sages. At other times, Krishna laughed and wept like other children, and displayed joys and griefs over toys and trifles. He was sent to learn literally lessons from a teacher, and there he was sitting at the Guru's feet and meekly conning the drudgery. He was told of to hew wood in the jungle and bring a bundle of fuel for the hearth of the Guru's household. He submitted quietly to the ordeal and spent hours, if not days, in the thickening darkness of a forest, engaged along with a schoolmate in hewing away logs of timber. This was the Lord's Maya. Equally mysterious are the ways of the Lord's Bhaktas descending on earth to fulfill his work. They give notice at times of who and what they are, but the warning passes away like a flash of lightning and disappears in the prevailing gloom and hardly leaves a trace even in memory. Ordinarily, they follow the human routine of work and seem to share the common joys and sorrows incidental to and making up the lot of human life. The author speaks about how the miracles exhibited by the Avatara Purushas are not making deep impressions in the minds of those who witness it. And that is God's wish or the Lord's Maya, as the author calls. So ordinarily they follow the human routine. They also behave as if they are happy or sad based on the situations and surroundings. Judged as a common boy whose initiation as a Dvija had taken place, Vasudeva was bound to be sent to school. So he was packed off to a village school nearby. The schoolmaster took charge of Vasudeva's education from this period up to the time when Vasudeva turned his thought to renunciation. Sriman Madhva does not say for how many years Vasudeva underwent the status pupillari. We are left to conjecture the duration as best as we may. It could not have been a very short period, for the course of study embraced, besides poetic literature, the Nyaya and Vedangas in their most comprehensive purview. The schoolmaster was of Pugavana, Totantillaya in the vernacular descent. He was a learned Brahmin whose knowledge of the Upanishads was of no mean order. He was a fairly popular teacher, as may be gathered from the circumstances that his classes were numerously attended. One of the pupils in this school was the schoolmaster's son himself, with whom Vasudeva contracted a lasting friendship that seems to have continued throughout his life. So, as Vasudeva was exhibiting the ordinary human routine, he also was sent to school by his parents. And the school, he resided there at the teacher's place and continued his studies in the Vedangas, Upanishads, and other things from the schoolmaster, whose name was Totantillaya. He was very learned, that Brahmin. and he was quite a popular teacher because there were quite a number of students who attended his classes. At that place, Vasudeva made a long lasting friendship with the son of the schoolmaster. How many years he studied there is not known clearly, as the Madhwacharya does not enumerate it. It will be incorrect to call the institution in which Vasudeva received his education after his Upanayana a village school in the strict sense, for this conveys the idea of school fees, grants, salaries, and inspections that earmark such a school nowadays. Before the establishment of village primary schools in the 19th century under British rule, such schools were rare even for vernacular education and rarer still for Sanskrit studies. There were, of course, teachers and learners in abundance, but the system was quite unlike the public schools of modern India. Firstly, there was the teacher who imparted secular instruction alone, taught grammar and poetry, and carried the pupils through a course of logic. He got some payment for the task, though the levy of a fee was far from being universal or regular. All classes of boys, whatever their sectarian differences, gathered round the teacher from far and near, some boarding in the Guru's house itself, and others going home for meals and spending the rest of the time in the Guru's house. The pecuniary remuneration that the teacher obtained was seldom more than a trifle. He dispensed learning mostly for charity. It gave him a status in society and brought him fame as a learned man. The boys usually rendered personal service by attending to his personal requirements and doing such offices as dependent relations or servants would usually perform in large households. The teacher did all the teaching unaided by any assistant. He handled the various grades of students at various hours during the day or night and did his duty earnestly, irrespective of reward. There was another kind of teacher whose position as a guru was of a higher scale and rank. This was the guru who taught theological and sacred works. He was looked up to with great reverence by his disciples and by the public. He was bound to teach for no monetary return. So we see how the kind of place where teaching used to happen. It used to be mostly in the house of the teacher himself, and the teacher used to not demand any particular fee for it. He used to just accept whatever small amounts that the parents would offer as Guru Dakshina, and it was required for the student to help around in the household by doing whatever chores the Guru or the Guru Mata asked of them. That is one type of the teachers who used to teach mainly the grammar, poetry, and other things of a secular nature. And then there was the guru who was much of a higher rank who used to teach the theological and sacred works. He was looked up to with great reverence by everyone, and he was bound to teach for without any monetary return. It was a sin for him to demand a fee or refuse instruction to any deserving pupil. A halo of sanctity covered on his person, and made his calling highly meritorious. Parents and pupils exercised great circumspection before selecting a guru of this class, for the tie once established could not be dissolved for life. This is the institution which produced eminent rishis of old, rendered hermitages the resort of men in quest of spiritual culture, and produced an aristocracy not of wealth or social rank, but of sacerdotal learning. Princes and paupers met here on a common footing of equality and studied under some rishi, partaking of a coarse meal in his hut, and rendering him every kind of service, drawing water and hewing wood for him, and fetching him holy twigs and tulasi for his rites. The guru who used to teach the sacred works and the theology was very much revered during the times, and parents and pupils used to search about a lot before they decided to choose a certain guru. And that guru used to teach everyone irrespective. After taking them on as students, he used to just take them all as equals. He used to not discriminate based on their social wealth or rank, but used to just teach them. Both princes and paupers used to meet there on an equal footing, and they have to study under the rishi, partaking the meal which he provided at the hut, at his home. In return, they used to render him service like bringing water for the worship and bringing him holy twigs and tulasi for the rites. Things then approximated to the ideal university spoken of by Cardinal Newman in connection with ancient times in Europe, a university not of ceaseless cram and perpetual examinations, but of genuine masters whose magnetic personality produced heroic characters, whose lives were monuments of self sacrifice, and whose teachings had the ring of the inspired word about them. Vasudeva's teacher at the period of life we were speaking of belonged to the former class. It is presumable that he was a Pandit of renown, for he had many pupils learning under him who were the companions of Vasudeva in his sports beyond the hours of the tuition. Madhyageha would never have sent his son to a stranger were it not that the latter was a more learned Pandit than himself and the better qualified to ensure a proper grounding in the literature and science that then formed a liberal education. So we see that Vasudeva's teacher must have been quite a well known guru of the former kind. That means the previous one, where he used to teach well the secular texts and all the grammar, the logic, everything. So since he was much more adept in that, that means much more than Madhyageha himself, he decided to send his son to that Pandit who could teach him the literature and science. He himself was well versed in Itihasas and Puranas and very probably knew much of philosophy. But no education was deemed high and liberal until the tangled mysteries of the Nyaya literature were mastered. Madhyageha probably felt that his own proficiency in this branch of study was not quite up to the mark. Moreover, Vedic recitation is an art by itself. Few persons attain excellence herein. The labor is strong and arduous to get up whole volumes of Vedas by rote. The teacher who is fully qualified in this respect is a marvel of memory. Madhyageha was probably weak in this point also. Hence he resolved to put his son under a competent teacher who would see to the Vedas and the Nyayas efficiently. The intention of Madhyageha was to instill the proper learning and chanting of the Vedas and the proper understanding of the Nyaya Shastras, Nyaya literature. He wanted his son to be having a mastery over these topics. And maybe it was that he did not have enough mastery to teach him. So he decided to send him to a guru. The ability and learning displayed by Sri Madhva soon after his renunciation in dialectical disputations with Nyaya scholars which secured him distinction as Anumana Tirtha, as well as the ease with which he often quoted any Vedic reference with accuracy, are traceable in a large measure to his studies under his village schoolmaster. We do not forget, of course, that Sri Madhva was divine avatar whose knowledge was already profound. But gods behave like men when moving in their midst. They eat, see, and move like men, study and expound like men, and resort to human methods in fulfilling their missions. Hence, in looking at these matters from a human standpoint, inferences based on the average human experience and ordinary data of human affairs seems to be largely permissible. Madhva's mastery over logic brought him the name Anumanatirtha at a much later date, that is, after his renunciation. He used to engage in dialectical disputations with Nyaya scholars and win those debates. And it was very easy for him to quote the Vedic verses as references for him. And these are all like what he learned in the schoolmaster's house. Vasudeva's career, and of course we have to keep in mind that he was a avatara purush, so he would have profound knowledge already, but it was the kind that he exhibited to study and then display, which was the human nature, which was the human standpoint. Vasudeva's career as a student at this period of life was marked by no event worthy of special note. He was very quick in mastering what he was taught, so quick that his grasp puzzled his master and led him to believe that he did not pay sufficient attention to his lessons. At first sight, it looked as if Vasudeva spent more time on field games and sports than on study. His strength and agility were matchless. There was not a single exercise or play in which he did not show himself head and shoulders above his peers. His grip, if he chose to hold anybody in his hands, was an iron vice out of which there was no escape or release unless he chose to give up or slacken his hold. Vasudeva, as a student, he never exhibited any particular worthy mention, any particular incident was, I mean, it's not really mentioned. So, what has been mentioned is that Vasudeva found the studies very easy, and he used to spend a lot of time on play. And even in play, he used to be always head above shoulders on above all the people, all the other students in his group, including his peers. So his grip was so strong that if anyone was caught in his grip, they could not escape until and unless he himself released the grip. No boulder of rock was too heavy for him. In short, he showed a Bhima's strength and courage in his sports, and people called him by that name as especially appropriate to his strength and prowess. The schoolmaster wished to ascertain if the lad who was such a personification of health and strength was not really neglecting his studies in favor of outdoor game. He called him one day and rebuked him for his inattention. Vasudeva replied that he knew his lessons thoroughly and deserved no rebuke. On being subjected to the test, he repeated the Veda in question with jata, pada, krama, and all with a degree of accuracy that struck the teacher mute with admiration. It was a marvelous feat of memory. The teacher was quite satisfied with the lad's attainments. So, as Vasudeva engaged himself in more play, the teacher was um, quite restless, thinking that Vasudeva was not paying enough attention to his studies. So he one day called him aside and asked him to chant certain Veda parts, which were recited very, very well with perfect accuracy. So the teacher was almost like struck dumb in admiration at Madhwa's abilities. During this period of study, Vasudeva laid his teacher under special obligations to him by a certain incident. The Guru's son, his schoolmate, suffered severely from a congenital headache. Those who have suffered alone can realize the full extent of the misery caused by this terrible complaint. Vasudeva could not bear to his dear friend suffer from the breathing agony. He called him aside one day and blew into his ears a strong puff of his divine breath. This cured him instantly, and the cure was perfect. It is a secret what more was affected by this puff of important wind. Those in the know say that its effect was not confined to the physical plane alone, but extended far beyond. It is said that the patient thus treated was enabled by Vasudeva to obtain a glimpse of his past births and conditions. Vasudeva and the son were friends. The teacher's son had a terrible complaint which was there from birth, and that was headache. So one day Vasudeva, who used to see his friend suffering, was very had decided to help him. So he blew air into the ear of that friend, and his strong puff of divine breath cured the headache instantly. Not only his physical plane, but he had a lot of improvement in all the planes other than that also. In fact, it is said that that boy was able to get a glimpse of his past births and conditions. When the studies were approaching completion and it was almost time for Vasudeva to leave the school, the great Upanishad of Aitareya was begun. This is a work of which Vasudeva was particularly fond of. His great partiality for this Upanishad continued throughout his life, as the sequel will show. When the teacher began an exposition of this work on the old beaten lines, Vasudeva took him apart and expounded the sacred verses to him impressively in his own way, in strict accordance with well known canons of interpretation, basing his views upon accepted works of authority. The teacher was convinced with the result that a genuine bhakti for Govinda was implanted in his heart. Here was a fit reward for the Guru's labors, a meet Guru Dakshina for the long course of instruction that he had given to this and other pupils. It was his good fortune that he stumbled once in a way on such a gem of a pupil, and his reward was a priceless bhakti which ensured eternal salvation. With tears of joy and gratitude, the Guru dismissed Vasudeva, invoking God's choicest blessings on his head. While bidding him goodbye, he charged him with the great mission of instructing the world in the paths of devotional worship and creating among good people a school of true bhakti towards the Lord Sri Krishna. Vasudeva, after his studies was completed, it was time for him to leave. But before that, the final days, they were being taught the Aitareya Upanishad. The Aitareya Upanishad is very dear to Acharya Madhwa's heart, as seen by his works on that, and the fact that he was chanting and teaching the Aitareya Upanishad, after which he left for the Uttara Badri when he departed from the world. From the when he, I mean, decided to become invisible to the normal people. So his exposition on these on the verses, that is the Guru's exposition on these verses, was going as per the prevailing norms. But Acharya took him aside and expounded the sacred verses to him very very impressively in his own way. But he was always making sure that he was very close to the no. I mean, he was sticking to the canons of him, means how they should be interpreted. Any verse, any phrase, or any word, how should it be interpreted? There is a norm for that. He used to always do it according to the norm, and the teacher was convinced. And as a result of this, after listening to the Aitareya Upanishad expounded by his student Vasudeva, the teacher was enthused with a bhakti towards Govinda, which was growing for him. And this was like the biggest Guru Dakshina anyone could offer to him. That devotion to Govinda paved the way for eternal salvation. He was blessed to have such a student who could teach him about the true meaning of the Aitareya, and at the same time he could inculcate that devotion which would bring him moksha itself. So with tears of joy and gratitude, the Guru dismissed Vasudeva. Dismissed means he bid farewell to Vasudeva and prayed for the God's choicest blessings. While bidding him goodbye, he told Acharya that you should go ahead and preach to the world a new form, with a great mission of instructing the world in the path of the devotional worship and creating among good people a school of true bhakti towards Lord Sri Krishna. This was his final bidding to the student when he was leaving. That is, it was a big ashirwad. At the same time, it was like a what he should be doing in the future that would be most beneficial to the people, the good people of the world. So here ends the chapter 6, which is from the life and teachings of Madhwacharya, which we have just now finished, Upanayana and early studies. From there, we move on to the new chapter from Upanayana to Sannyasa, which we will cover in our next sitting. May the Lord be pleased with this study of ours. May all of us be blessed with devotion towards Vasudeva, who appeared as the son of Madhyageha, and Vasudeva, who appeared as Lord Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Shri Krishna.